What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Star Chasers Girls Talk Ball. As always, it's your girl Cravin Cowboys in the building. I've got my girl Star here with me. I'm going to go ahead and let her introduce our special guest for this evening that she was able to bring on. We're very excited, you guys, but thank you guys for joining us.
Hey, what's up, everybody? I know it's your girl Star here for another episode of Star Chasers Girls Talk Ball. We're so excited today because we got special guest today, Joseph Hoyt from DLLS Sports. Y'all know that they've been doing phenomenal work over there with the player interviews and just insight, giving us insider insight about the team. We're so excited. Me and Joe been following each other for a while, and I just reached out to Joe. I'm like, Joe, would you come on our show and just talk some football with us? So I'm so glad that Joe agreed and accepted the invite to come on. So just to shout out everybody real quick in the chat, Amp, shout out to you, Amp, Ty Church, Angie, Kelvin. We really appreciate all y'all in the chat. But how you doing today, Joe?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here. We just had Tyron Smith's wrap up here, so I'm still at the Cowboys facility right now. But happy to talk with you.
Yeah, awesome. So I guess you brought up Tyron, so let's get right on into it. As y'all know, we lost Tyron last year to the Jets. We got to give them a right, but we're still glad that Tyron, of course, came back this year just to sign they signed just like a day contract, so that he can retire Cowboy. But Joe, you can just kind of tell us, like, what was the environment like today in the presser. Saw a lot of familiar faces. Jason Garrett, Marcus Ware came out. Who else did I see out there? I think it was Zach Martin, who we know also retired, unfortunately. But yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, it was kind of almost surreal a little bit because in the last couple months now, in that same exact stage, same exact setting, we've said goodbye to two prominent Cowboys, and Zach Martin and Tyron Smith, both of whom are going to be bound for the Hall of Fame. They're bound to go in the same time as of right now. I think Zach Martin's the first ballot Hall of Famer. Tyron, we'll see. I think the injuries played a part. He only played 4 complete seasons when you think about it, but in those seasons, in that time, he was fantastic.
I didn't even think about that, but yeah, I guess you are right. Only 4 complete seasons. I think he joined in 2014 or 2015.
So Tyron was 2011 draft.
2011. Oh, I'm thinking about Zach Martin. I forgot.
Yeah, I get him confused. But it was kind of crazy. And one of the things that we talked about with Tyron Smith today was he was the first Cowboys first-round pick in 30 years as an offensive lineman. They hadn't drafted an offensive lineman. And then he was so successful, they said, hey, why don't we do it 2 of the next 3 years with Travis Frederick and Zach Martin too? Obviously, that built a wall for the Cowboys that led them to a lot of success. But as Jerry Jones called it, a big tragedy that they never got to an NFC Championship or a Super Bowl. So that was kind of the sombering reminder of today's press conference. But Tyron Smith was someone that, didn't speak much, and he kind of acknowledged that before he gave his press conference speech. But when he did, it was impactful, and his presence was felt. I asked Marcus Ware, how would you describe, getting a punch from Tyron Smith back in the day when they used to duke it out in battle? And he said, hey, it kind of always felt like your heart stopped when he hit you. He also told a story about how
that's crazy.
I know. He told a story too about how during a walkthrough in Tyron Smith's first training camp, he gave a punch to DeMarcus Ware, and DeMarcus Ware said, if you ever do that again, it's going down. So there was a lot of those future Hall of Famers together. But yeah, very somber day and a day to honor Tyron Smith, though, for sure.
Yeah, I think that, sis, do you have anything on that?
No, I was just going to kind of add to that. I think Michael Parsons kind of spoke about that when he first joined the Cowboys and had his first training camp, talking about how it was going up against Tyron Smith. Even though, and others have spoke about. I think it was Osa who spoke about going up against Tyron Smith and just saying that some of these guys just kind of grow, like not just going against other opponents, against other teams, but sometimes going against your own teammates kind of your game as well. So it's kind of it's just really interesting to hear that not just other players from other teams in the NFL, just in general, but other players on the Cowboys in general talk about going against these Hall of Fame players. That also helps kind of their career as well.
Right. And I want to hit on the point of that. It's unfortunate, and I'm glad Jerry said it, that it is a tragedy. that you have a player of the caliber of Tyron Smith, who was the best left tackle when healthy in the league for years. You know what I'm saying? For a very, very long time. And even before he left and went to the Jets, he got an All Pro nod. So I think that it's sad that all of these legends, all of these greats that we've had coming in and out of Dallas, and that we're still looking at where we're coming up on a 30-year, 29-year drought of not even getting it. It breaks our hearts to see that we didn't even reach an NFC championship game with these players, because these, when we know these players, they deserved it. You know what I'm saying? They Tyron, Zach Martin, Beware, even though he did get one with the Broncos, but
Yeah.
they deserve to get one as a Cowboy, because this is where they put their whole careers here. Even though they may go and play another place for a year or two, but they put their careers here. So it's just really unfortunate. And
And to kind of add to your point too, as well, sis, Zeke, players like Dak, even more recent players of, we don't see some kind of maybe a quick turnaround next upcoming years. Hopefully it won't, but we could probably, it would be unfortunate to see the same kind of end with those players as well.
And that's right, because I mean, regardless of what you want to say about Ezekiel Elliott, Zeke was the best back in the league, hands down, for 3-4 years. You know what I'm saying? I would say from 2016 to 2019, best back or one or top 3 back in the league at that time. And so, it's unfortunate. Then we see now Dak is our oldest. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think Dak is our oldest player on the team, which is crazy. He'll be 32 his birthday, I think. And so it's just crazy that we've seen all their whole careers here, and we're like, we know as fans that these players are good enough, because we look at these other teams and we see Super Bowls being won. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So the fact of like, well, what is going on with Dallas that we haven't been able to reach that pinnacle? Like I said, even reaching the NFC Championship, I think this year hurt us a lot as Cowboys fans, because you look at 2 teams that you can beat when healthy, which is the Philadelphia Eagles, who won a Super Bowl, the Washington Commanders that we beat this year, even in a injury-fueled year, and you see them in the NFC Champ. And then our defense coordinator, who was here for us for 3 years, goes straight to the NFC Championship. His first year in Washington. So it's so much, that I feel like it's compounded on us as Cowboys fans. Which kind of leads me into, well, I guess let's talk a little bit about, because there was rumors that came out that Dak had lost 50 pounds, which I think Ferg was just trolling. Clearly Dak has not lost 50 pounds, but have you seen Dak in person, Joe? I don't know if you went to the cancer event that they just really had, but what is your take? Does Dak look like he lost weight, or does he look like he just kind of? To me, he looked like he's like slimmed or trimmed down, but I don't know if it's weight loss, because he said he ain't lost no weight. But what do you think about that situation?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that he's really made hammered home is that there's actually been a weight distribution, is kind of what the wording he's using. It's a weight transfer. Because when you look at what he's been doing in terms of his recovery from his hamstring injury, there's been a lot of leg work. He's trying to strengthen his legs again. So he's saying that, not as much upper body this offseason that he might have done previously. Now he's doing a lot more work in his lower half, trying to really kind of re-engage the mobility that he thinks is required to be a successful quarterback in the NFL. I think that's one thing. You kind of look at what's the difference between Dak Prescott 2023 versus 2024. 2023 MVP caliber season was fantastic. I thought in the early part of 2024, he wasn't really extending plays as much as he was. He was also getting a lot more pressure, to be fair. But there was kind of almost a little bit of lack of willingness to run or to extend plays from the pocket until that Atlanta game, and I thought he was doing really well until he got hurt.
Until he got hurt.
Yeah.
I know, and I blame Clarence all the time, because I think Clarence reading off all the people had more rushing yards than him. So then Dak said, "All right, I'm gonna go prove a point."
He had to bring up Joe Flacco. I mean, look. Come on.
Just the random stats he always want to throw out. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, but I do think, like Dak did kind of admit to a couple of reporters in the walk-offs today that he's probably about 5 pounds. That he's a little bit slimmer.
Okay.
He joked that he's the Slim Reaper now, Slimothy. The Slim Shady. Um, so he looks good. I will say he looks good.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that, with Dak, I was when I went through all of Dak's injuries, I'm like, I really will say that this past tearing the hamstring off the bone, although it was a accident, but I still say, Dak, out of all the injuries, and I don't know if you know Joe, but I'm like a super Dak fan, stan, whatever you want to call it. But I'm like, with all the injuries, I'm like, I put this one on Dak just a little bit because I feel like, in 2020, that's a hip drop tackle. I'm like, I feel like 9 times out of 10, your leg's gonna get snapped off if you're. That's why we banned it from the NFL. So you have the hip drop tackle, and then his finger gets randomly hit from us throwing Tyler Smith out there. Just a bad play. I feel like those are kind of like freak injuries, but not like where you can put it in like a recurring injury in a particular place. But I think when you talk about, Dak's hamstring, it did. I agree with you, Joe, that it did seem like Dak was less willing to extend plays, that he had kind of become because 2023 we saw the extension of plays. Obviously, he was on a tear. You know what I'm saying? The 2023 MVP season for Dak. I still think he should have got MVP over Lamar Jackson, but whatever. That's not here nor there. But I think that we didn't see that mobility, and I remember there was a clip that came out when Dak was at TE University with y'all know that Kelsey and
And Kittle and all them in Nashville.
I
Yeah.
tried to
Yeah.
university, and so they had Dak out there, and I remember seeing Dak like his upper body. He looked jacked, like a almost like like an action figure. I'm like, dang, Dak's really put on a lot of weight. So I'm glad to see that. And maybe he's just putting more weight, on his body to protect him from hits or whatever. I don't know. We're not in that training regimen, so I don't know why he put on the weight and stuff like that. But I am glad to hear from you that it does seem that he is putting more focus on his lower half mobility. Because let's be honest, that's it. And you can tell me if I'm wrong or right, Joe, but when it comes to the new trend in the NFL quarterbacks, it's the athletic quarterback, right? The quarterback that can run, he can extend plays, he can do all of this. And, when we look at our division, you have Jalen Hurts, who's an athletic quarterback. You have Jaden Daniels, an athletic quarterback. And then you have, well, the Giants, they don't really have that. But yeah, you have us, which is like Dak has always been mobile, but it's just like, over time that he's become less mobile. But it seems, do you think that Dak is going to, now we're not talking about like QB option, Lamar Jackson style, but do you think that Dak is going to be more mobile, use his legs more in this Schottenheimer offense?
I think there's a chance because I think that there's going to be an emphasis on Brian Schottenheimer to do that for Dak. He's going to kind of tell him, hey, I want you to make plays. One thing that we've talked to Brian Schottenheimer over the last couple of years, and one thing I'll say, if you haven't heard of Brian Schottenheimer press conference to this point, you guys have, I'm sure, very insightful guy, very, very willing to give information when you ask for it. And one thing he's kind of talked about is, in terms of extending plays beyond the 2.3 seconds, is that allows Cowboys playmakers another level to get open. When you look at CeeDee Lamb, I think that CeeDee Lamb might be one of the best kind of off-kilter, off-script playmakers in the NFL when it comes to making plays beyond the 2.3 seconds and coordinating with what a mobile quarterback like Dak Prescott could do. So I think, to your point, Star, I think it's going to be something that's emphasized this year for Dak Prescott and the Cowboys.
Yeah, it is crazy because Scotty was talking about how under play that he had Kyler, and Kyler never really won. Kyler is athletic as he is, which I don't know how Kyler had from his injury, but he was quick this past season when he did run. But he was saying that Kyler never really wanted to run, but I'm good. I'm glad to hear that we'll incorporate it just a little bit more. Like I said, not necessarily because what I'm looking for from Dak is more so Mahomes style, where it's just like if it's not there, you just kind of just like get the chains and get out of bounds and let's keep the ball rolling. If you get out, play above the 2.3, not cute. We're not doing. I don't know. People think Dak got to be doing Lamar Jackson, Anthony Richards, Jalen Hurts RPO style offense, but that's not happening over here. But just when it's there, just pick it up, Dak, and slide. That's the key. Slide, please. Because we can't afford we can't afford
Right.
him getting injured.
Right.
But
Yeah,
just
and actually, kind of piggyback off that question, just because, which is with the new staff and the new philosophies that should be coming in for like a week away. Like, what's kind of the temperature of the Star? Like, how excited is the organization to kind of go with the new offensive line coach, new OC? With just so many staple positions, being filled by younger coaches and newer coaches coming from the college level. Like, what's kind of the temperature of the Star, and just how excited is the organization?
Yeah, I think frankly there's a lot of excitement. I think that there's a lot of, kind of new energy. I mean, you talk about all these new coaches that have come in, and you got guys from the college ranks and Connor Riley and then Junior Adams with Oregon. These guys are kind of teachers, developmenters. You look at some of the guys that they brought in from Chicago, including Matt Eberflus. It was funny. At one point I saw DeMarcus Ware, Matt Eberflus, and Micah Parsons all talking. And I was like, oh, that, Eberflus is kind of, let me hear what you have to say to Marcus, but also Micah, let me talk about how I'm going to use you on 3rd and long here. And that's going to be a big emphasis for what, Matt Eberflus can do with the Cowboys, is how does he use Micah Parsons? But I think there's a lot of excitement, frankly. And I think it's kind of interesting. I wrote about this last week. When you look at what the Cowboys have done in the offseason, in their mind, I think that they have set themselves up to draft the best player available at 12. Yes, they've got some needs, I think, that are a little bit higher than others, but at the very least, they have put bodies in places that can at least be serviceable when it comes to starting, and they feel like they don't really have to force certain things at certain places in the draft. And I think there's some excitement about that. As we'll talk about, I think wide receiver is, someone to pair with CeeDee Lamb is still high up on that list, and I think personally is what they'll target at number 12. But there's some excitement here for sure.
Absolutely. And this is, Joe, I don't know, our brains are just sinking together, because I feel like you keep saying stuff to the next topic. The article, because I was like, let's talk about this article that Joe wrote. This is what he's referring to, guys. You guys can get a subscription. I got a subscription.
Yes, me too.
DLLS Sports, where Joe just wrote this article, like he said last week, where he talked about Cowboys putting themselves in the best position available. And I wanted to talk to you about this article, Joe, because there's a lot of people that do not think that we are set up to go BPA. They feel like, there's some holes, you know what I'm saying? They feel like we still have a hole at right guard. We got glaring holes at wide receiver 2, glaring holes at, cornerback 1 or 2, or however you want to play it, with, Trevon being out and probably not being back with us till maybe mid-season. I don't know how his rehab is going, but, I don't know if he's going to be ready by the beginning of the season. And then I think, like, another hole, some people who are not confident on Mozzie, feel like we need another nose tap. So when you have those fans and content creators who say we're not going into the draft BPA, why do you necessarily feel like, do you feel like the holes that we have, because I agree with you, honestly. I do think that we still do have a glaring hole at wide receiver. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
I think that when you look at the other positions, that the Cowboys did put a few bodies. They got cornerbacks and linebackers, running backs. Who else did they add? We signed back our young safety, so we have the safety depth. So I know we didn't go out and spend, and you said that in your article. You were like, Cowboys did their typical. I think it's right here where they didn't spend big. They targeted quantity, over quality, which is the Cowboys' way. Instead of going out and getting those big names. But why do you feel confident, though, that, because a lot of people thought Brian Schottenheimer was BS and talking about, we're in the position to, go through BPA. But, like, why do you feel that, based off of what we've done, we have gone we are in position to go BPA because that's not really a popular, I guess, opinion.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think that that's fair. I think one thing though that kind of needs to be, uh, kind of laid out is the idea that there's a difference between what we might think and a difference between what people inside the Star might think in terms of what they've done. Right? We may look at a signing like Solomon Thomas or Peyton Turner and say, oh, I mean, that's questionable, right? For a defensive line, that's questionable, and I
Right.
still think that that's true. But they
Yeah.
might look at it and say, hey, we look at those are two former first round picks that we can make into something that can be really serviceable and productive for us here on the Cowboys defensive line. I think yes, they have not precluded themselves from trying to find high end talent in certain positions, but they have kind of put a lot of signings in certain positions that would allow them to at least field a team. And that's kind of the point I was trying to make with the article is that, hey, if you don't get Ashton Jeanty at 12, that's okay. All right. I think you can find another running back later on the draft when that does kind of fit in terms of value to kind of pair with the two guys you already have. I think, hey, if you don't get wide receiver at 12, and this is the one kind of exception. I think if you don't get wide receiver at 12 and you really, 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 really want to get a Robin to CeeDee Lamb's Batman, I'm not sure in this draft where you're going to get it. 44, maybe, right? You still might have that high end potential. But I think 12 is probably your best bet with it. But I will say, they like Jalen Tolbert a lot. They do believe that there's something to mine out of Jonathan Mingo. They like the idea of Kevontae Turpin getting more reps at wide receiver. So I think we may look at the wide receiver core as oh, it's a little underwhelming. I do think that they like some of the guys they have and the potential they have under a teaching coach like Junior Adams to take the next step.
So do you think? Well, first of all, Slick, did you have anything on that?
No, just kind of adding to Joe's point there, and also to your point earlier about CD Lamb just being really a really dominant receiver and kind of all strip plays. And I'm not saying Tolbert is like CD Lamb, but Tolbert is really another wide receiver in that room who's kind of created that connection with Dak Prescott and actually does kind of eat off those kind of those breakaway plays, or where sometimes where they had those scramble plays and Tolbert happens to be in the right place at the right time, or sometimes he's kind of put in that extra work with Dak Prescott to kind of be in that right place at the right time. So I think that, like I said, not putting him on the same level, but I know a lot of people are doubting him as far as the wide receiver 3. He's not my favorite choice as far as wide receiver 3. I would like to get, I'm sorry, wide receiver 2. I would like to get another choice at wide receiver 2, but I do like Tolbert's progress, and I think even Dak kind of mentioned today in his interview about Tolbert looking good and putting in a good offseason program. So I would like to see what it looks like, what the next step in that relationship between those two does look like on the field. But I do agree with Star. I do think we need to definitely attack the wide receiver 2 position.
Yeah, I think that, and I like what you said here. In this part that I'm showing of the article, Joe, where you said that the people that we put in these positions, it does not prevent the Cowboys from drafting there either. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. I think their philosophy clearly was put some bodies in this position to where we don't feel deadlocked, and I do think that the Cowboys, like for example, and I just thought about it today, the Cowboys always consider if they pick someone up via trade, via a draft pick, they consider that player a part of the draft class. So Domingo is there who they feel like that's a body that they already put there. Even though they didn't do it in free agency, they did it at the end of last season, but they feel like that's a body that they put there that is kind of similar to the tier of the players that they got, where it's they didn't really work out at their previous spots, but they feel like these players have a Kyer Elam or I really love what's his name, Kenneth Murphy, but there's some people that don't think he's great. You know what I'm saying? So kind of pick up these players, these younger players, even Sadiq Charles, who retired, but he's still, I think, only 25, 26. So they pick up these younger players where they
Peyton Turner, I think he's still in his younger 20s, 23, I think.
Turner, right. They picked up a lot of players where they're you're young, and we feel like we can mold you, which brings me to this next point that you brought up about Junior Adams. So do you think, because the one thing that I know Cowboys fans, well, most, there may be some that didn't like it, but I think most Cowboys fans were really satisfied with how they went about the coaching process. I think we were satisfied. I think we were very impressed because we are used to Coach Retreads here, or, we love Coach Mike. I wish we wish him the best, but Coach Mike did hire a lot of what we call homeboys. You know what I'm saying? A lot of his friends and just like I'm just gonna get my homeboy from Green Bay and from here or whatever and put him here. And we didn't necessarily feel like was that out was that coach was that best for that position or was that just basically a nepotism or this is my friend so I'm just gonna put him here. And so it didn't feel like Brian Schottenheimer went about the coaching process like that at all. It feels like he went out and got people that he may not necessarily he knows or he heard about, but people where he feels like outside of his box or outside of his world that he feels like can enhance and upgrade his team. But do you feel like the Cowboys are putting a lot of emphasis on these coaches because these coaches to maximize these players as because a lot of these coaches are thought of as teachers or developers?
Yeah, I think 100%. I think that has been their clear-cut strategy. I think, when you look at Brian Schottenheimer, in terms of will he be a successful coach, the jury remains out on that, right? Was the process bad in terms of how they interviewed people to get to him? Yes, I think they could have done a lot more. But one thing Brian Schottenheimer has proven over and over again, I think, is that he's willing to think of a plan and try and execute the plan, right? And I think that there's logic behind his decisions, which is not something you could say about every, person in personnel or every head coach there is. One of the logics I think that he realized here with the Dallas Cowboys, having been here for 2 years already, is, hey, we're not going to probably sign the biggest free agents, right? We're not going to shell out that kind of money. What the Cowboys want to do is they want to draft and develop. So I have to find guys that will develop what we draft, right? In terms of, and then also develop low risk signings that we have for not much money, outside, like a Peyton Turner who's been hurt but was a former first round pick, like Kenneth Murray, who's got all the talent in the world, just hasn't put it together. Kyrie Elam, a former first round pick who hasn't worked out. So I think when you see the coaching staff they put together, with Connor Riley specifically, that's a guy I did a story on him, shortly after they hired him. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that was my big takeaway was at Kansas State, he was charged, and even before that, when he was at a smaller school, he was charged with taking guys that, were not big recruits and turning them into NFL draft prospects, right? Cooper Beebe, for example, was a defensive line recruit. He never played. He wasn't an offensive lineman, let alone a guard.
Right.
Their starting center at Kansas State was a tight end in high school, that they moved all the way and bulked up the center and became a guy that received draft interest and ultimately didn't sign anywhere. So long story short, the guys that they signed, in terms of their coaching staff, I think align with Brian Schottenheimer's philosophy and his plan for trying to making the most of what they have here in Dallas.
Right.
Yeah, I think that matches perfectly with Clayton Adams. I mean, we just heard of him as of recently, just as last year, taking teaching up rookies and teaching up undrafted free agents. I think his name is Paris over there on the Cardinals. I forget his full name right now, but they said he had a great year. Yeah. Yeah, Paris Johnson. They said he had a great rookie year, so I'm excited to see what he can do with young guys who are on our line, like a Tyler Guyton, I'm saying, who's played different positions on the line, Cooper Beebe, who's played different positions, even the Terrence Steele, who's kind of coming back into form. I've been reminded a lot watching Girls Talk Boys Talk that he hasn't really missed a snap. I'm saying, playing on this O line. So I really like the potential of what these coaches can teach our younger guys, and if you will, some of our bets as well. Tyler Smith, as I mentioned, Terrence Steele, what next level they can bring this O-line as well.
Mickey, I think that's a great point. Sorry to jump in, Star, but I think it's a great point because I think Connor Riley and Clayton Adams, there's going to be a lot of factors. But I think in year one, what's the big test and what they're going to be judged on is what do you do with Tyler Guyton? How do you get Tyler Guyton to take the next step? And I think if they can get Tyler Guyton to take the next step, that's a huge testament to what they're doing early on in their coaching career. If Tyler kind of struggles a little bit, or if Cooper Beebe takes a step, or even if Tyler Smith doesn't become the perennial All-Pro, you start to wonder how the coaching and teaching philosophy is actually being put into action.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I do. That was one thing that I didn't like under Mike and Dan Quinn, although we had a lot of success here. With those coaches, I did not like how I feel like a lot of our talent didn't really develop. Especially on the defensive side of the ball, it's like our talent is not, and then the wide receivers as well. So both sides of the ball, I felt like we had certain players, but we just never was able to get it clicking for them. And then sometimes we would even see players take a step back. You know what I'm saying? Like Mozzie, his rookie year, he was not at all what we thought he was gonna be. Let's be honest. His production, how he played, we were like, "What's going on with him?" You see him in Michigan, he comes here and it's just like wasn't working. And then you see young wide receivers like Tolbert and stuff like that, who Tolbert probably had 3 snaps this rookie year. So it's like just guys that like we just weren't able to get up to speed. And I do like that it does seem like an emphasis of this coaching staff is like Brian Schottenheimer keeps saying that they have specific plans for these players. And they have like the specific, I guess, off-season plans or whatever, where they're trying to get these players to really elevate and take the next step, and really ascend. Because I do think a lot of our players do have what you call untapped potential or untapped talent, but they really just have not had the coaches. And I think one thing with Brian Schottenheimer that I'm really hoping is that with, and I was just thinking, like when we were under Mike, we didn't have Mike is what I call, he's more of like a delegator, CEO type of coach, where it's like, this is your job, you do your job, I'm going to worry about doing mine, but not so much a motivator, if you will. Because I was thinking, I was like, when Mike had Kellen here, who clearly they weren't on the same page, we didn't have total meltdowns like we had in 2020. I think 2023 was, I mean, the playoff loss, I think it was just mind blowing. I don't think anybody could have predicted that that was going to happen. I still think people have questions on why did that happen? What happened? Why was the team so completely out of it to where it was like we just could not keep our heads above water? So, do you think that Brian Schottenheimer is that motivator, that leader of men, if you would, the Jimmy the type that can just get the men all playing as one so that we can perform better in the big game?
Yeah, I mean, whether that actually translates to success in the games, who knows? But in terms of building a locker room and a culture, I think that might be one of Brian Schottenheimer's strongest assets. I think when you look at when he first got to Dallas, he was an offensive kind of assistant, right? But he wasn't working with the offense; he was working with the defense, and the defense had a lot of great things to say about him. Guys that were on the defense, guys. When they hired him, I texted a couple guys that even had a lot of more special teams emphasis, and they were saying, "I love Shotty. Like, this is going to be awesome." And so, I think one of the big things in his favor is that he is a locker room guy, he's a culture guy. Whether it's doing crawfish boils that they already had at the first day of workouts, or other things that were in conjunction with, I think, Dak, and Meat Church. I think that they're going to be. I think that's going to be one of the strongest things that Brian Schottenheimer brings to the Cowboys.
Is that locker room culture, and that's what I'm hoping, because I did, when you listen to our greats like our Michael Irvins and Emmitt Smiths and Dion when he was here, like when you listen to them, they always, and Nate Newton and stuff, when you listen to them, they always say how close they were. They were so close. It was never, this is offense, this is defense. It was, we're brothers. We're just all here together. We play with each other on the field, but we also have bonds off the field, and playing ping pong or whatever, doing whatever, just having fun and building that camaraderie. So I'm really hoping that Brian can bring that camaraderie together, and I'm really happy, that although he didn't have to show up because he's not obligated to. I mean, CD's not there, but Micah did show up. So OTAs, right? And he doesn't have to. He's not, he don't have his contract yet, which he should.
Right.
He should. Jared, he should. But he showed up, and it's kind of cool to kind of see him. That picture you posted between him and Eberflus and DeMarcus Ware, because it kind of gets you a little bit excited, like, oh, like, is D Ware gonna work? Are they working on something? Because I forget that. Yeah, D Ware, he was under Eberflus. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
was able to really come along and have some of the best years of his career. So I think it's exciting. And what are your thoughts just generally on Micah? Leadership. Obviously, there was that big blowout between him and D-Law, who we was all mad about that. I'm not gonna lie, I was mad about that. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. But, what do you think, this defense will do under Micah, as the new leader of the defense.
Yeah, I think sometimes when we talk about leadership, it's almost like someone driving and how they complain about other people's speeds, right? You always think you're going the right speed, but someone else is either going faster or they're going too fast. Or if people are going too slow, like, oh, they're going way too slow. And in reality, everything's kind of relative, right? And I think leadership can kind of be the same way. Just because someone leads in a certain way, that might not be how you would lead. That doesn't mean you should judge their leadership style, right?
Right.
Or at least say that that's the wrong leadership style. And I think Micah probably leads in a unique way. Obviously, he's not afraid to talk about things on his podcast, right? He's not afraid to, tell people what's up, I think, in terms of the locker room. And, but he's also younger. And I think that's one thing that's kind of interesting is I think there is kind of a generational divide, happening between his age group and 10 years older, right? And I think that's where the DeMarcus Lawrence kind of Micah Parsons kind of friction happen is it's two different age groups, So Malik Hooker's age group might align with more DeMarcus Lawrence, but Osa, who was drafted with Micah Parsons, might more align with Osa. And you kind of saw some of those things playing out a little bit too. In terms of his leadership, I think it's going to be a fascinating thing to watch, in terms of him being the guy, because I asked Jesse Hawley this on our show, like, what happens when there's like a transference of power, a transference of like leadership power to one group to another. And, he said it's a huge opportunity and it can either be, taken or it can be lost. And I think that's something that's going to be something to watch with Micah Parsons this year as he truly becomes on the defensive side of the ball, the alpha. But one thing I will say in terms of, and we saw Tyron Smith pointed today too, in terms of the whole locker room though, that is Dak Prescott's locker room. So there is no worry about transfers of power on a collective basis. That is
because I think that it is important to know, like, this Dak is the leader of the team. I consider like Dak the head, but I do consider like CD, Micah, Tyler Smith, who else would I put up there?
I wouldn't even put Osa with him getting this contract. I mean, him taking Mozzie underneath his wing. He talks about Stan Williams coming back. I think I would look at Osa as a leader.
Right. It's like those guys are like what I consider like Dak's generals. And I get that term. Yeah. I got that term directly from Micah's podcast when him and CD did that podcast in 2023 in the Super Bowl. When they were like, Dak is our leader, but it's like, where are the generals? Where are the people that can, because Dak can't do everything. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's only so much he can do. So it's like, where are Diggs is another one, Paul. What's up, Paul? Yeah. And Amp and Lou's in here.
Yeah, even White.
Rico, Dwayne. I saw my other guy in here. Miss LaDonna. Sorry, I'm just trying to give out some JV.
And Andy.
Andy, everybody. I think Dave popped in here. Thank you guys so much for being in the chat with us. But yeah, I think we need those generals, if you will, that can help steady the ship. You know what I'm saying? And enforce, ultimately the same spirit of Dak onto these guys so that we can get the best. Because I always say, if this team was full of 100 Dak Prescott, we'd have 10 Super Bowls. You know what I'm saying? But unfortunately, we don't have that. So we have to be able to work people with different personalities and all of this type of stuff to ultimately get the result. Twyman, a shout out to you to get the result that we want. And Dwayne Morris as well. But since you can say something, then we can go into the receivers. But go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a kind of a two-part question talking about the point of leadership. Just a question for you, Joe. Do you think that's partially why they kind of brought in coaches from the college level, some younger coaches as well? Because, I mean, we look at Shoddy, a little younger than McCarthy. Do you think they wanted to kind of bring that energy? Not saying that was the sole reason they brought in Brian Schottenheimer, but do you think that's kind of why they brought in, a coach like Schottenheimer and some of these younger coaches that kind of, because of the transfer, because we have players like Micah, CD, some of these younger players that are drafted, you think that's kind of why they brought in some younger coaches?
So I don't know for sure, but I do think that that's a great observation, and I think it's very possible because when you look at what college coaches have to do, they have to go recruit every single year to younger and younger and younger generations, and even with the NIL, they've had to adapt on the fly and kind of be able to communicate with these younger generations in that way. And you look at, not only did the Cowboys hire Junior Adams and Connor Riley, two college coaches, they tried to hire two other college coaches for the running back coach position. They tried to hire Tashard Choice, who was at Texas. He ended up actually taking a job elsewhere. And they tried to hire Rashad Samples, who's only 30 years old, a Dallas kid himself, the Oregon running backs coach. They tried to hire him. Ultimately, he decided to stay at Oregon before they decided the Cowboys moved to making their hire here. So I do think that was kind of that's an interesting observation, Mickey, and I think that's something to watch, and it's something worth asking. As we get to the next chance to maybe talk with Schottenheimer, on Tuesday, that could be something worth asking.
Oh, nice. And then just a second part of the question. I know earlier we kind of spoke about Eberflus kind of talking with DeMarcus Ware and Micah. He kind of mentioned in one of his pressers about bringing in older players or former players, excuse me, to kind of come in and not necessarily they don't necessarily have to talk to the players there, but just kind of being in the room, kind of being in the environment. Do you think that's something we'll see more of? We seeing Ware, possibly maybe seeing Martin coming back, maybe something that's kind of heard amongst the nation. Sean Lee maybe possibly come back, teaching the linebackers. Do you think that's something we'll see more with Schottenheimer coming in, maybe former players coming back to kind of talk to the team?
Yeah, I don't think I think they'd welcome it. Sean Lee was at practice a lot last year. Not a lot. That's not fair to say. He was there multiple times. And obviously, like you said, he's at the market today, chopping
Yeah,
up with Michael Parsons. So,
yeah,
I could see it.
Yeah,
wow,
I
that would be nice.
would be exciting. I thought about like, what if Zach Martin and Tyron come in and gotta be like little
Yes,
coach or something. I feel like I would love for our Grace to come back and help us because it's like I want them to still like if we do win, like I still want them to feel a part because it's just like if we even
same.
win with you as a player, like having you here coach the new generation and helping us get to that point, I feel like the players would still feel that sense of gratitude, even though they weren't able to accomplish it necessarily as players. But anyway, we're gonna get into the draft stuff. We talked about 40 minutes of other stuff, but we'll get into the draft specifically and talk about today about the wide receivers because I think today most betting sports they got us saying we're picking a wide. I think everybody is saying we're picking a wide receiver. If we're looking at the draft experts, even Mel Kiper, he had mocked Amari and Hampton does 3 times in a row. Then he finally conceded, say, okay, maybe they don't go with Hampton. Maybe they go with Matthew Golden, if he's there. And so when we talk about these wide receivers, Joe, I'll tell you what my opinion on the class, and then you can tell me, because there is this general consensus that this class is not really that good. And, if you compare it to Malik Neighbors' class or whoever, like the 2020 class, I don't know, whatever. If you compare them to previous classes, it's not as good. And I feel like I partly agree with that, and I partly don't. I agree that it's maybe not as top heavy considering like elite of the elites, because obviously Malik Neighbors draft, you have Malik Neighbors, you have Brian Thomas Jr., you had who else? There was like a couple. Oh, you had Roma Dunze. Like you had a lot of these players that were considered like top flight or elite talent or blue chip or whatever you want to call it. And then this draft, you have Ted, who is probably, I think people would say he's different, but then everybody else under him, they don't really consider them that much of a difference. I think that I agree that it's not as top heavy, but I feel like this class is deeper in the sense of because I feel like in the last year's class it was like all of these top heavy, but once you got to like the second, third, fourth, fifth round guys, you're like, who cares? Guys, you know what I'm saying? I feel like this class is the opposite. It may not be all of these top flight guys, but it's still like there's a lot of guys that you like in the bottom of the first, second round, third round. There's a lot of guys that you're like, I would take him, I would take him. So what is your overall consensus? And Mickey, you can say what's your overall consensus first of the wide receiver class, Mickey, then we'll go to Joe.
I just kind of looking at some of the different guys, like you mentioned, Golden. I took a look at Egbuka as well. Of course, Tet as well. I love Tet's stride. I really love his length. I really think that adds a lot to his game. But I mean, as you mentioned, Golden. I think not saying they're similar, but I see a lot of things I see in Tet and Golden. But he's just a little bit smaller in size, but he has the speed. So I wouldn't be mad at either one of those. I like Egbuka as well, but I feel like with us having a CD Lamb, I see Egbuka do a lot of things out of the slot. So I'm not saying they do the exact same things, but even let me look up another guy, Egbuka, and also
Luther Burden.
Luther Burden. Yes, yes. I feel like not saying those two are similar, but I feel like those two individually. I'm not sure if the Cowboys, those would be a perfect fit for the Cowboys because they have similar aspects as a CD Lamb. But I do love Tet and I do love Matthew Golden as well, and I also do love also just to kind of throw another name in. I do like Jack Besh, and I did see some talk about Savion Williams, but I'm not huge on Savion Williams, but I do. Oh, I guess my sister isn't big on Savion
I
Williams
think
as well. So
as a project, like he's not a guy that you, for me, he's not a guy that you need to pick above like the fourth round because he's a project to me. But you see what he, if he could be coached up, you see what he could be because he is
yeah,
a player that they play wildcat quarterback, all of this stuff with him. So he's like a
yeah,
football player, got that great size, but it's like his hands is
yeah. And he takes a lot of hits too.
hands are not the best. Yeah.
Yeah,
So when you play wide receivers, like we kind of need you to be able to catch the ball. That's the only part.
yeah.
So
And get down the field.
right and get down. So that's the issue. But yeah, Joe, what's your thoughts on wide receiver class?
Yeah, I think you both laid it out really well. And I think one thing to consider about this wide receiver class, yeah, in terms of high-end talent, I don't think it's there, right? I think Tedero McMillan, in my opinion, is my favorite receiver among the group, excluding Travis Hunter, of course. And when you compare him to last year's draft, is that wide receiver 4? You know what I mean? You start doing that. And so I don't think the tie-in talent's there. But, sorry, to your point, I do think that there are some guys in the back end that can do really, really well. I like Deontay Thornton from Tennessee as a possibility. I think Andrew Armstrong from Arkansas is someone, if you watch him, you're like, wait, is that CeeDee Lamb back in college? Like, from the look, it's kind of trippy.
Yeah.
I like Ricky White from UNLV is like a guy that could go out and make some plays and will block his butt off and be a special teams asset as well. But here's the problem with this receiver class in the Cowboys, and I kind of talked about this a little bit earlier. I think it's a bad year to not have high-end talent for them because that means I think when you really see what the Cowboys are looking for, I think they've got a lot of guys that could be solid number 3 receivers. I think Kevontae Turpin is, as a gadget, is good, right? And I think he still has potential to take the step. I think Jalen Tolbert can be a really, really good wide receiver 3 in this league. Yeah. I think Jonathan Mingo, we'll see, right? But Harris Campbell, we'll see. Yeah. And I think you can find those type of guys that can compete there in rounds 4, 5, and 6. But they need someone opposite of CeeDee Lamb, I think, that does something different, right? Yeah. And that's where I keep coming back to Tedero McMillan. I wrote a big feature on Tedero McMillan and his volleyball pass. When you think of wide receivers that play other sports, you think of basketball, right? And he played that too. But he played volleyball at a really high level and would have been a really highly recruited guy if he chose to pursue it. But one thing the volleyball really gave him was the ability to time jumps up really well, to use his height, and to really have great hand-eye coordination. And the sneaky thing is, in basketball, when you see people dunk, right, they're usually dunking off 1 foot, right? Well, in volleyball, they do a lead up and they get to a 2-foot base where they jump off 2 feet. Right. And if you watch Tedero McMillan's contested catches, a lot of them come when he's leaping off 2 feet. And that allows him to really extend his catch radius, sideways and kind of some errant passes. So I think in terms of Tedero McMillan, I think he brings something that the Cowboys don't have. I think it's something they've been searching for. You look at Jalen Brooks, you look at Jalen Tolbert. These are guys that they kind of want to be the guy that runs slants and can make contested catches, and they kind of have it. Ryan Flournoy is an example too. They haven't really put it together. Yeah. I think Tedero McMillan could be that guy day 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I was gonna say I think the guys not. And just like to your point, Joe. Like I don't think it's a point to be looking in the later rounds because no offense, because I think guys like Tolbert, Flournoy, and Brooks, those are kind of like the later round guys right now. We need someone who's a top tier wide receiver, like you said, like a Tet, Matthew Golden, someone who can literally be on the other side of CeeDee Lamb and be another threat, another third down threat, another red zone threat. You say we need to when we have those critical downs, those critical conversions that we need a situation where everyone's not thinking, okay, they're going to CD. You know what I'm saying? We need a situation where we have another threat that Dak Prescott be able to go to.
I agree with that. And I think Tet for me is number 1. Now I'm gonna be honest. Do I like Matthew Golden more? Yes, but I put Tet at number 1 because Tet has consistent years of high level production with Arizona, which it's like who is over there, like who is a part of their offense,
Yeah.
their quarterback. I think
And
him
he
and his
hasn't missed a game.
right has the durability. And what I like about Ted, because Ted's knock is like, can he beat press man? Which I think everybody's had that question. Can he be pressed? Can he be pressed? I do want to say yes, he can be pressed. I see Ted. To me, my comparison for him, which may sound weird, from the games that I watch, is a little bit of CeeDee Lamb-ish, where I feel like he has the ability to. CeeDee Lamb is like this incredible football player who's actually, I have to give more credit to CeeDee Lamb because his route running has gone from where he started his rookie year to where it is now. I think people do consider CeeDee Lamb like one of the best route runners in the league now. But I see them both as guys where it's like, these are guys where it's like you can, they're more of a, what's the word? Like I see a lot of yak from Ted, or at least a attempt to get yak, and I see that from CD. Like when they get the ball in their hands, they're trying to make plays. They're not just going to be guys catch the ball and go down. CD, he
Right.
catches the ball, he's going to try to stop on a dime, spin around. Let me see if I can get 5 more. And I see that same type of mentality from Ted. But I
Yeah.
also see, when you look at a Ted and a CD Lamb, I feel like their temperament is kind of the same, because we see in certain games, CD will get in his head and it's like, dang, this. I remember one game when we played San Fran. We don't play them like every year, but I can't remember what year. But there was one of the years, probably the 2023 year, where Isaiah Oliver was playing press man against CD Lamb. And you'd be like, who? Is Isaiah Oliver even close to the caliber of corner that CD Lamb is a wide receiver? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But CD Lamb is the type that he can get in his head, and it's like you're just not focusing in, because it's not something that you can't do it. It's that you're allowing the mental side of the game to affect you, so you're not doing it. And I feel like I've seen that with Ted, where it's like in games, the corner was being physical with him. So he dropping, like, this is like with CD Lamb. CD will drop a ball and it's like, come on, CD. You know what I'm saying? Like he'll drop a ball and you can see he's getting visibly upset. But then when he turns that gear, like, all right, I'm about to show you. Then in that same game where Ted was dropping balls and it seemed like the cornerback was getting the best of him, then he just starts going off, catching every ball. Now he's getting 15 yards a yak. So I see like that same type of temperament where it's like Ted really is a guy, and I think like you said, Joe, he gives Dak what we haven't had, and we have not had a 6'4" wide receiver. Dak has not had that wide receiver that is like, listen, it's getting difficult. No one's getting open. I'm just gonna throw this ball up to Ted, and Ted is going to come down with it, because Ted does have, I would say, great to elite body control. People say it's kind of Dez-ish, like the way that he comes down with the ball, like it's and how consistent he does it. That's what makes you special, because some people can make some crazy catches, but it's like, are you making these catches consistently? And I think that's where Ted stands out to me. But what are your thoughts on Matthew Golden? I love Matthew Golden. I know people criticize him because they say, well, what did you see his stats in Houston and all of that stuff? But I'm like, listen, I don't know who his quarterback was in Houston. You know what I'm saying? I don't think he was very good. But I do know that once he came to Texas, and Quinn Ewers also was not very good. But I think that probably Quinn Ewers was obviously better than his Houston quarterback, whoever that was. But when I see, what I love about Matthew Golden is, I agree with you, sis. I see a lot of great body control.
Yeah.
The ability to adjust to really difficult or maybe bad throws. I see, very good hands, not dropping balls, making the contested catches, the ability to elevate. You don't see that much yak from him. I know a lot of people knock him too because they say you don't see that 4.29, but I do see from Golden, I do see a refined route runner.
Yeah.
When I look at his film, I'm like, this kid is running routes, and it's like, because how Texas offense was, it wasn't very, because there's offenses where it's like, it's the system, it's not. receivers to system.
Yeah,
But
and I kind of get your point, sis. And like you said, even though Q and yours wasn't the best, I kind of kind of get that credit to Golden because that kind of for me it kind of shows the connection. Hate to use the word connection, but that just shows how Golden tried to make that connection with Ewers. And even though plays broke down, even though Ewers was under pressure, sometimes he'd be on the ground when he's trying to throw the ball. Golden would consistently put the effort to either come back to the ball or to make those catches. Like you said, it may seem impossible. May seem like impossible catches. So I think that more to maybe the relationship he had with Queen Ewers. So if we bring in a player like that, maybe he could kind of build the relationship with Dak Prescott. You know what I'm saying? Maybe that could kind of translate on the field in that manner. And so maybe we can kind of look for a player who has that mentality that knows just how important it is to have that connection with the quarterback, and maybe it can translate that way.
yeah,
Yeah.
and go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, no, my thing with Matthew Golden is I think that it's an example of a guy that I really liked before people really started knowing about him. And then now I'm like, oh, the love affair with him might be a little strong. I personally, I think, I would rather have Tedero McMillan over Matthew Golden. I don't think Matthew Golden's 4.29 speed translates, and that kind of makes me question things a little bit, right? I think that there's a lot of upside talent there. But if the Cowboys are looking for a true compliment, I think it goes Tedero McMillan. I personally might even take Emeka Egbuka over Matthew Golden. That's a personal thing.
Yeah.
He definitely shows a little for more physicality. I love his physicality.
Emeka Egbuka, I would say probably the most complete. If you want to be honest, I will say that if you're talking about completeness of our receivers, I would say Emeka Egbuka probably is that. The only issue with Emeka Egbuka is that he primarily played out of the slot, and that just leaves that's the question mark on him. Like, can we rotate you? Can we move you out of just the slot and you still be able to have success? But when you look at him, I mean, I feel like what is there not to like about Emeka Egbuka, especially in the run? When you talk about physicality, which that's what Brian Schottenheimer said, he wants his identity of his offense. I want physicality.
Yeah.
When you turn on the tape and you look at Emeka Egbuka, what he's doing in the run game, it's like this is what you need. When you look at schemes like the San Fran scheme, what is something that stands out to you? The way that those wide receivers are blocking on run plays, because it's a certain mentality, and you really get that from Emeka Egbuka. I feel like even better than Ted, you get that mentality from I'm going to block, but then you also have the route running. You also have the great hands. Even Emeka Egbuka, they were using him as a red zone target. He's not that tall. He's like 6'1" maybe or something. I don't know, but he's not that tall, and he was one of their key red zone targets. You know what I'm saying? So when you think about it like that, some people comp him. And when you look at their draft reports, it is similar to what's his name from the Lions?
Amon-Ra.
Yeah, Amon-Ra St. Brown. They say it's kind of similar. Their draft. A shout out to HTM Sports. He pointed out how he had their draft reports lined up side by side, and it was almost identical of how these players are seen. And when you look at, I would take an Amon-Ra St. Brown. would you take?
No doubt.
Right.
Exactly. So I definitely think that when you look at Emeka, I really like Emeka. I think that I would be happy, honestly, if the Cowboys got. And I'm gonna go back to what you said at the beginning, Joe. You like, this is a class where you can't really afford to not get a wide receiver because if you do, by the time you get to pick again, you could be wiped out. Like when you think about these guys, like, because these were guys that weren't even popular, but now all of a sudden their names are blowing up, like Jaden Higgins. Everybody's like, oh, you can just get Jaden Higgins in a second. You don't have to go wide receiver. Really? You could just go Trey Harris. Trey Harris will be there. Really? Are you sure that they'll be there? Because it does leave it to where it's like these wide receivers are getting real popular. And you could have it like last year we're at pick 44. So by pick 44 last year, 8 or 9 wide receivers were taken off.
Yeah. And I think that's low too. I mean, like if you look at his history, usually it's 10, 11 receivers have already gone by 44. I don't think that'll be the case. I'd imagine honestly 5 or maybe 6 are gone by the time 44 comes up. So
Yeah.
I mean, I like Jack Bish. I mean, you pointed him out too. I think that is a
Yes, yes,
I
that
love
could
Jack
do
Bush.
well.
yeah.
I feel
He
like
was.
So
yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was going
no,
to say, like, as far as tall physical receivers, he was like my second most, as far as height, just most physical at the catch point. Just, I really love his play style. He was definitely on my list.
Yeah. Yeah. Jack, I love Jack Fish, and that definitely would be a target for me if he's there. Like, if say hypothetically Genty falls, okay, but we don't think that that's not. But honestly, let's talk about it because I think what's his name, Tony Pauline or something. Pauline came out and reported. Oh, look at Joe's face. He came out and reported that the Raiders may be drafting Bimbo. And now, of course, leading up to this time, everybody was like, "It's Ashton Genty. We already know they're drafting. Just give it up. It's Ashton
Right.
Genty." But now I'm like, is there a possibility that the Raiders pass on him and draft Mimbo? What do you think about that, Joe?
I think it's possible. I would caution things that Tony says. To be honest with you, he says a lot of things.
Okay. All right. That's
But it's possible. I do think that there's a scenario, and I think people are kind of like, oh, it won't happen. I think Chicago really wants to fortify the lines. I think that they could draft. Albert Breer talked about this today. I think they could draft an offensive lineman, even though they've signed all these guys and traded for these guys. I think that they know what in Detroit, what was so successful, the defensive line. You look at these things.
Right.
It's like they lost a lot of guys there. So
Mhm.
I could see them going in offensive line at 10. And so it's like, wait, if Raiders skip on GT and if the Bears skip on GT, then there's a shot. I still think it's kind of I don't want to use the word long, but I wouldn't put the odds heavily in favor of him being available at 12. But it's possible. And I think if he's there at 12, the Cowboys should run to the podium to select him.
Run at the podium and get him as soon as possible.
That's
And I'm in agreement with that. Even at first I was like, get Ted over Genty, but I was like, listen, they're both there. Like, I feel like who Genty is. I just feel like then when he did at his pro day and all this stuff, I just don't feel like you pass up on him. Then I know, who he's been training with. It's just like I don't think we should pass up on him. I just feel like this is the next, like our Ezekiel Elliott and stuff. Like, this is the next back we need that could take the league on by fire. And we already know that if we do have a killer, if we have a serious run game, which we haven't had in quite some time, but if we actually have a serious run game with a real running back and a real run scheme, that could cover a multitude of sins, you know what I'm saying, and cover up a lot of things that, you may not necessarily want to expose. So I agree with that, but I do think, talking about some lower rounds, or not lower round, but just guys that you could target, say if for some reason, what would be the scenarios do you think that the Cowboys would not? Oh, here's a better question. What are some of your dark horse? Because everybody's saying Ted or Golden. But what are some of your dark horse candidates for if Ted and Golden are not there that the Cowboys would take? That you think that they would just stand pat at 12 and take?
Yeah, I think that for me, the dark horse is an edge rusher. And I know that they already signed Dante Fowler, but I think when you look at what they're trying to do, ultimately, I think you got to try and replicate what kind of the Eagles did to the Kansas City Chiefs, and that's just get after the quarterback. So I think the one fascinating guy is Shamar Stewart, because Shamar Stewart, when you look at every measurable, it's impressive. He is the perfect edge prospect, right? But only 1.5 sacks each of his years in college football.
Production.
My wife went to Texas A&M, so I watched a lot of Texas A&M.
Yeah.
I wasn't even so really on his radar as a draft guy, and I watched a lot of Texas A&M.
A lot of Texas A&M. Yeah.
But you look at Danielle Hunter, because Danielle Hunter only had 1.5 sacks in his last year in college.
People have brought him up. They have brought him up. Somebody else brought up like Ezekiel Ansah or something. They were like, so it's not going to be unheard of, but I just feel like for the Cowboys at 12, you need a player. Just get a player that I feel like is kind of a sure thing and not somebody that you're going to have to teach how to pass rush or teach how to close. Because I love the measurables. I mean, it was great. It was Miles Garrett level freakish. the way
Yeah.
they tested at the combine. But I think the one thing that he's missing is production. He's missing production. And so, just to close, Joe, because I know you got to go, but do you think, because you said pass rusher, so do you think, what about somebody like a Mike Green? Do you think
Yeah.
Cowboys will pull the trigger on a Mike Green at
I don't
12?
think it's unheard of. I don't think it's unheard of. I think realistically they're trying to get playmakers. And Shaw and I were talking to us on the edge, right? And you start coming from the edge out, and I think that pass rushers, including that. The one guy I wish they would take y'all is if those receivers are off the board I wish they would just take Jade Barron and put him in the slot and just say, you know what, let's cook. But
Okay,
I
look, I
think
was gonna ask about corner. So you think just take, like, if you're wiped out, take Jade at 12 and get out of
the thing is, I don't think they would do it because Eberflus loves long armed corner and
it.
Jade's got short
You got
arms.
another
So
Dan
hey,
Quinn?
I know, but what about Will Johnson? Or what about a guy that's rising fast that is very popular right now? Is Trey Amos? What if Trey Amos goes a lot higher than people think?
Then you
Or
expect, right? Exactly.
So
Those are. I think that this is a draft, and we'll wrap it up here. But I do. Somebody report. I can't remember who it is. They're like, this feels, because I've been I've been looking at because we're getting prepared for the draft. So I've been looking at other teams, and I just feel like nobody knows at all, like, who their team is going to draft. I just feel like a lot of people are like, I have no idea. Like, they're just throwing out all these ideas and saying what they would do. But I feel like no one really just has it locked in. Like, yeah, this is going to be the pick. Like in previous drafts, it was just easier to predict. So it's going to be interesting to see what's taking place next Thursday, to see who are people going to draft. I feel like the only one
Yeah.
you know for sure, Cam Ward. That's the one
exactly.
you know for sure. But everybody else, we have no idea who these teams are picking. Just a bunch of names have been thrown out. But
And especially today with Steven talking about some of the possibility of us moving, of Cowboys moving back. I mean, now that kind of just throws another wrench, see it, they decide to make any moves outside of that. So I'll be interested to see if they make any kind of, flashy moves.
and again, a lot of teams are saying that this may be hard. This is going to be a hard draft to move back, because it's like, who's going to be willing to trade up when people 12 to 20 something, the talent is the same. So it's like, who's really going to be willing to trade up besides maybe those who want to get a quarterback. But
Right.
anyways, guys, this was a fantastic show. We are so glad that Joe came and joined us. We need to have Joe on here again. I feel like Joe gave us a lot of insight and nuggets and stuff that we did not know. So I really appreciate you coming on here, Joe. Joe, you can just tell them, kind of where to find you on X and DLLS. And I think you joined another thing. I saw like a post pinned on the top of your X page where you're reporting for somewhere else or something.
Well, that was DLS. Yeah, I just kept it up there from last year.
Okay, okay.
But yeah, I'm on X at Joe J Hoyt. You can see me on Monday through Friday at 11 a.m. on DLLS Sports, where we talk some football with DLLS Cowboys, and yeah, all over the place. But thank you both, Star and Mickey. It was fantastic to actually talk with you guys, and thank you so much for having me on, and keep up the great work, because it's been awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate you, man.
Definitely be reaching out to you again. Maybe we can have you on sometime later. We appreciate you.
Yeah. Thanks
Sounds
a
like
lot
a plan.
for coming through. Thank you.
Let's see. I'm trying to see if there's any questions before we let out. I'm just checking the chat. We really appreciate you guys rocking in the chat with us for sure. I'm just trying to see if y'all asked any questions that we may have missed. I don't see none. So yeah, I think this was a great show.
Yeah, facts.
We had Joe on. I think Joe gave us some nuggets talking about Connor Riley, about his developmental skills, obviously Junior Adams.
Yeah.
And it's kind of giving us an insight to this is how I like that Joe gave us an insight to how the Cowboys think. We don't, as fans, agree, right? We may not always agree, but I do think that the Cowboys feel like they do have adequate bodies at each spot. Even today, I heard we're working out another guard. I'm like, how many guards we gonna work out and add? But
I mean, they were been mad or what? I don't know.
But they worked out another. But I feel like they are putting all these bodies at these spots so that they truly can go in, BPA. And I do think, I agree with Joe that I think it's gonna be either a wide receiver, or if we get wiped out, that they may take a corner.
Yeah.
they may take
It's
a
definitely worth the risk. It's definitely worth taking the chance.
right because we need it. So it's like they may take a corner or they may take a what else did he say? There was a dark horse. He said, "Oh, edge rusher." That's another one. Like I could see them picking Mike Green, and I don't know if we've met with Mike Green necessarily.
I don't think I saw him on the list
I
on
know
that top
I know
30.
he's on a 30 visit, but I'm trying. Did we meet with him even informally?
Let me check. I got the list up right quick.
Yeah,
I don't see him on the Dallas Day list either.
okay, let me see. I'm trying to remember because somebody has sent it to me in my DM, like how you can look up this stuff. Chat, how you can look up all the people that we've had the meetings with. Okay, I think this is it right here. Oh, filled it up. So it looks like the Cowboys. Let me see if it's on this list. Here. Okay. So it looks like who met with? Who am I looking for? Mike Green?
Yeah. They have Shamar Turner on there.
Yeah, they got Shamar Turner. They got Shamar Stewart, obviously. They met with him for a 30 visit. And also, yeah, they've met. So the list they've met with is Michael Williams, Shamar Stewart, James Pierce, and that.
Walter Nolan.
Yeah, but I'm talking about like edges. Alfred.
Oh,
Yeah, that's a typo. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So they have not met with Mike Green at all. I would say that
yeah.
if the Cowboys are going to pick you, they would have needed to have met with you with some sort. But it doesn't look like they've met with Mike
Yeah.
Green at all. So they may just make because I know he has some allegations, so they may just not be interested in him. Like, nah, we good. We good on the people with allegations, which I can't blame them. It hasn't worked out. What'd you say?
Were those actual allegations on Bond, Isaiah
Yeah.
Bond?
But we met with Bond, but we did. Yeah,
That's
that
why-
is. Yeah, you're right. Sis,
Wow.
we did meet with Bond, and he,
You know what I'm saying? So I'm like, and I mean,
where do we?
you know, his around. You know what I mean?
So let me see. Let me look at what's the Combine. Okay. Yeah, they met with Bond at the Combine. So,
Okay.
like I said, they have not met with Mike Green at all. That's the same thing like people who were pushing for Tyler Booker. It's like they haven't met with him at all. So I don't think that the Cowboys will be drafting, especially in the higher rounds. In the lower rounds, yes. But in the higher rounds, I don't think that they'll be drafting anybody that they haven't met with. So now I kind of going to remove Mike Green from the list because they haven't met with him at all. So I do think that the pick is going to be wide receiver because they've met with all of the top wide receivers. They've met with Ted, Matthew Golden, Luther Burden, and Mbuka. So maybe they're feeling like we're just going to pick whoever is there at 12 that, whoever's off the board. We're just going to pick there at 12. They may move down if there's a team that maybe a quarterback fell, and they feel like, we need to move up and get them. Maybe finesse a team. But other than that, I don't really see us moving down. I think we may stand pat and pick at 12. So I think it's either going to be wide receiver or it could be out of left field, a cornerback. But I can't be, like I've been saying for weeks now, I can't be mad at that because...
Right, because I would be surprised because even to your point about DEs, I don't see a lot of DBs on the list as far as who they've met with. I only see Siobhan Rebel, and then even on the Dallas Day visitors, I really don't see a lot of DBs on there. I see Hudson Clark, and even he's a EDFA.
Yeah, they met with Trey Amos. That was at the Combine. They met with Jahade Barron at the Combine.
Oh,
they've met with, let me see. Going through this list. Maxwell Harrison. So it looks like they met with a lot of DBs at the Combine. but they didn't really do a lot
Okay.
of 30 visits with the DBs. I know they did do a 30 visit with Revel. What's his name? Revel from Trevon Revel
Siobhan.
from East Carolina. Yeah, they did a 30 visit with him, but that and then yeah, but that's it. That's the only 30 visit that they did with the they only did a 30 visit with one DB. Everybody
Yeah.
they did meet with multiple DBs, but the rest of them that they met with, the top ones that they met with were all at the combine. So it's possible.
I think that's. I was gonna say I think that's interesting. I mean, those two particular, even safety, because I know you guys were talking about maybe a dark horse choice. Like I don't know how far down Makuba would move, but I mean, do you think they would, maybe pull the trigger on him if he's available somewhere in the early rounds?
In the early rounds I could see. Not at 12. I think at 12, yeah.
Right.
In the early rounds though, I could see them. It just depends on their board how high they are on them. But yeah, I think, and shout out to Joe. What up, Joe and his son DJ? I did a show with them like a month ago. They're
Yeah.
okay. Sorry, someone's listening. But anyway, y'all, this was a great a great show. And Rico, I do agree with you on Restrepo. I did watch Restrepo, and I know he did terrible. Ooh, he did terrible at his pro day. So I don't know what that was about, but I do think that his film says that he's a good player, and I think a lot of people gonna pass on him because his pro day was so bad. So if you want to double dip at wide receiver, he's a receiver that you could grab in the low rounds, that could compete with somebody like a Jalen Brooks, and because I do think Restrepo has
Yeah.
more talent than Jalen Brooks, uh,
Yeah.
or Flournoy or whatever. So you could definitely double dip and bring that in. But
And I don't mean to cut you off, sis, but I love that you brought that up today, as far as on our show, bringing up how they brought in developers as these coaches, like a Junior Adams, and I'm glad that was our focus point today, as far as the wide receivers, because we kind of had that in this room for a long time, CD and just a lot of guys who haven't really shown development over the years. So I'll be interested to see if they, with them bringing in a new wide receiver coach, to see if moving forward, if our guys can continue to raise their game to the next level. Going forward,
yeah,
not just this year, but also depending on how long they decide to keep them around, if these guys can
yeah,
develop.
Junior Adams is gonna be huge. Because we got a lot of wide receivers here, and it's like we're gonna see. They say you would teach you develop. We're
Yeah,
gonna see. You know what I'm saying? If you can
yeah,
get these players really executing, because I just need these players to execute to the best of their ability. And last year was a lot of sloppy, lazy route running, poor
yeah.
execution, not knowing where they need to be on the field. Like I need Junior Adams to
Hmm.
fix that. You can't give a player more talent, but you can at least have the player prepared within their talent capability. And I did not even see that
Hmm.
from Robert Prince. I know people were like, "Oh, Robert," I'm like, "Good riddance," because I didn't see what we needed to
Yeah.
see from any of these outside of CD Lamb, who I know his development had little to nothing to do with you. There is no development anywhere else. So
Yeah. And I feel like CD was really really I'm not gonna say the only receiver he talked about, but when Prince was here, I really didn't hear a lot about the other receivers in the room outside the CD Lamb. So I'll be interested to see what
yeah,
kind of.
I agree with you. I mean, Prince, he just was a
Yeah.
very passive coach. He didn't really seem like he was really a developer at all. I mean, I wasn't happy when we got him
Yeah.
because I didn't. His resume was not very impressive. So who knows? He could have been another one of Mike's friends from way back when or whatever. That just
For real.
Anyways, thank you
Yeah.
guys so much.
But yeah.
Everybody in the chat, we really appreciate y'all and love y'all.
I love you.
Love y'all so much. We appreciate y'all. And hopefully y'all enjoy the show. Y'all know next week is draft week. So
That
it's that
time.
time because the mocks and all of that stuff will be stopping because we will finally know who we are going to pick at 12 or who we're going to touch down
Yeah.
and pick in the first round. So
Yeah.
y'all be on the lookout for that. We're gonna do a Girls Talk Ball show on Wednesday, and then on Thursday, I will be a part of the DC Universe Super Show. We're gonna be doing a lot of people,
Hey.
so that'll be fun. We're excited. We're excited for the draft, and this is always Cowboys' favorite time because we know this is when we get the good players. You know what I'm saying? Because we know in free agency
Yeah.
we're not gonna get those high prices. We're just not doing that.
Right.
So, this is our chance. It's like, whoa, we get excited to get some new fresh cow. But anyway,
Yes.
yeah, we really appreciate y'all. Thank y'all. Please be sure to like the video, um, like the show, like the streams on both of our channels. Mine is StarGazer Sports. Maggie's is Cravin Cowboys. Please subscribe to us, please, if you haven't already. And donate to our cash apps. You can see if we have there on the screen. And I want to give a shout out before we close out to one of my guys. I love him so much. He just always sends me random cash apps. What
Oh, you talking about
is
Julius?
that? Who it is? Hold on, let me.
I think so. Cause he sent 20 the other day. I appreciate you,
Julius, thank you,
Julius.
Julius. Cash
Yeah.
app the other day. Yeah, JVB boy.
Oh,
Yeah,
and it never registered because it always comes up as Julius. It never registers. Thank
boy.
you,
But thank you,
JV.
JV, for sending me random cash app. I really appreciate that so much. And yeah, guys, we bring these people on here just to give us better insight, perspective, and stuff like that. So it's like, if y'all enjoy the content, please like our videos, our streams, and stuff like that, because y'all know we are growing and trying to grow it. The day will be great when Mickey and I can both reach 1,000 1K. That'd be amazing because we can start getting super chats and stuff. So please, please,
Yes,
please help
facts.
us grow and share our content to as many people as you can. Really appreciate y'all.
Yes, really appreciate everybody joining in. Shout out to Star for bringing in amazing guests this evening. Really appreciate you, sis. Like you said, we'll continue to grow and bring you guys fire shows. And I'm really looking forward to the draft next week. And like Star said, really looking forward to getting the new guys in here and seeing what they can bring to our 2025 Cowboys. So thank you for your time, sis. Thank you for your time, everybody in the chat, and really appreciate you guys coming through. We'll see you guys next
See
week.
you
Peace
guys.
out.